Di flow.
Se basta io passo la telecamera. Se vuoi lo che basta lui è meglio, per me. Come fare? Ok, perfetto. Ottimo. Sono com'è? Ma guarda che io metterei una sedia quando arrivano. chiede, va bene, questa è l'ultima ricerca.
Buonasera, benvenute e benvenuti al terzo evento pubblico organizzato nell'ambito della Summer School della Academy for Global Humanities and Critical Theory. È il primo evento che si tiene negli spazi di Dambo. Ce ne sarà un altro lunedì con l'Ale Calili, quando discuteremo di logistica e di traffici marittimi. Sarà alle 19. Io mi limito a ricordare che è disponibile la traduzione in italiano accedendo a Zoom e selezionando il canale italiano in basso da Interpretations, e vorrei davvero ringraziare calorosamente i traduttori e le traduttrici che attraverso un lavoro tanto impegnativo quanto rigoroso hanno permesso anche a chi non è a proprio agio con la lingua inglese di seguire gli eventi pubblici della settimana. Quindi vorrei invitarvi a un applauso per riconoscere il lavoro delle traduttrici e dei traduttori.
So welcome everybody at this event that is jointly organized by Into the Black Box and the Academy of Global Humanities and Critical Theory. We want to thank Dambo for hosting this event, and also the Fondazione Innovazione Urbana and the Fondazione Gramsci. Today's event is an exploration into what many people are starting to call platform urbanism. That means that we are entering in a new era in which the platformization processes and urbanization processes are somehow merging, creating a new matter, a new environment in which our lives go on. And the pandemic has accelerated a lot this process, so we think that is really a crucial question to investigate and to analyze and to criticize and to develop new conceptualizations for framing and grasping what's going on in this direction. Today's event has two sides. So on one hand, in this place, we organized with many other people this exhibition that after the end of the roundtable will be showed also on Zoom, so that the students and researchers that are following this event online can also somehow have a taste of the artistic interventions that are hosted here today. So as Into the Black Box, we want to thank a lot Lucia Babina, the VSU Collective, Davide Blotta, Ilaria De Pari, Giulio De Meo, Michele Lapini, and Dario Sanna, that have organized this exhibition with us. As for the roundtable, we are really pleased to have here Helge Moshammer and Peter Mortenbock. They are the curators of the Austrian pavilion at the Biennale of Architecture. That is a quite big event that is still ongoing. It opened 1 month ago, and it will close in November. The Biennale of Architecture is a very important event in which the new emergent tendencies in architecture are somehow investigated in many different ways, and Peter and Helge have dedicated their pavilion to platform urbanism, and they have edited the book that you can also have a look at the entrance. And as Into the Black Box, we collaborated to such a book, and we have also to thanks a lot Carmen Lian Heinz. She's part of this project, and she's from the Center of Global Architecture, and Carmen has somehow she is collaborating with the Austrian pavilion, and she will also have a speech today. After Peter, Helge, and Carmen we'll have a brief intervention. There will be other interventions in this roundtable. So we will have Lucia Babina. She is a cultural activist. We will have Yvonne Atter. She is a Marie Curie fellow. And then the roundtable will be closed by Sandro Mezzadra, that will somehow comment the previous interventions. So thanks a lot again, and I leave the floor to Helge and Peter.
Buonasera, good evening. Thank you all for coming, all for watching, and of course, thank you very much, Niccolo, for the invitation and for the kind introductory words. We're particularly pleased here, I should say, to be here tonight, not only to talk about platform urbanism, but in particularly also to talk about the background of the project that we present at the Venice Architecture Biennale. And when we've discussed with Niccolo at the early stages how we could frame this event today, he was very much insisting on that we would talk about how we came to work on this subject, and also how we came up with the particular configuration of the exhibition that you can see in Venice at the Austrian Pavilion. And I stress this because the phenomenon of platform urbanism, although it's something that almost all of us somehow feel, so we feel the effects of platform urbanism, yet it's very difficult to grasp. It's a very ephemeral phenomenon, a very kind of fluctuating phenomenon. It's very difficult to put our finger on it, what it's about. So if you think about other kind of revolutionary moments or moments of change, of transformation, the Industrial Revolution comes to mind. Of course, for the Industrial Revolution, we have also very clear architectural symbols. We think about the factories, we think about the working class districts. But do we have any kind of symbolic monuments that would tell us about the configuration of platform urbanism? All we have to look at in most cases is just our mobile phone. So the mobile phone in many cases, and the apps that we use through them and via the mobile phone, are the only materialization or visualization of platform urbanism. So it's very, very difficult, even though we are aware of it, it's very difficult to present it and to demonstrate it and to represent it. So one of our tasks, and I suppose almost the kind of essential key task for our project in Venice, was how can we represent the phenomenon of platform urbanism in the context of an exhibition space. And while I'm not sure whether perhaps the majority of you had already had the chance to go to Venice and see the exhibition for yourselves, because we aren't sure of that, we propose to start with a short video clip, about 3 minutes long, that kind of summarizes some impressions of the exhibition on site. And we have this lovely team who supports us tonight. So if you could perhaps start with the first clip. Thank you.
Is the transformation from spaces of shared values into money spinning machines.
Perhaps the question is not how we can protect our privacy. 5G. It will become the lifeblood of the Internet of Things, which forms the lattice of platform urbanism.
How we want to live together. Post images of architecture / places / cities that you would like to see more in the future on www.platform-austria.org. Let's break down the boundaries of the platform and make visible what it is that we like.
Good. So this clip lasted for 3 minutes and approximately 10 or 20 seconds. And if I were to be cynical tonight, I would say, well, now you've seen everything which is there to see, because the average duration that visitors spent in a pavilion at the Biennale has been calculated around 2 to 3 minutes. But obviously that's not entirely true. And we are here precisely for the reason to show you more than what can be seen within 3 minutes. and not just because we had a few technical hiccups. So I think it wasn't quite right, the calibration of the size of so you didn't see everything purely even just for technical reasons. So there's more to be seen. I've said earlier that platform urbanism is very difficult to grasp and that it's very fractured. And this is, of course, no coincidence. It's the very characteristics of platform as a kind of organizational infrastructure to be fractured. That's what platforms do. They look for potentials, and those potentials are located in tiny pockets, be it in urban life or even in other domains. So it's always to be constantly on the lookout what potential there might be, which is not used at this very moment, but could be utilized. And it's the potential that lies at the heart of platforms, but a potential that is understood as being atomized and being distributed. And therefore, the challenge, both in kind of economic and technological terms, is how you can bring this very atomized potential, how you can bring this potential together. And speaking about the kind of research about this very fractured phenomenon. So what we did when we started out was to travel the world, as you do when you do field work, and we've collected impressions from many different locations around the world, and took this as a kind of itinerary, as a research itinerary, that what would happen if we would put all these kind of fractured elements, these fractured impressions, what would happen if we put these together? And to give you a bit of, again, make it tangible also for you here, let's just start with the slides and go through a couple of locations that we've visited and researched.
An activity, and their architecture is intrinsically related to how they operate.
Okay, so what we did, we numbered the different files, but for some reason, I think we've numbered them wrongly. So it should be number 2. Okay, and if we could just go on presentation mode, please. And as I said, these few slides at the beginning are really there to create a common ground on which we can then base our discussions later on. So the first site that you see here is a photograph of one of the block parties that Google had organized to introduce its new music app. And what you see here is in Venice Beach in Los Angeles, a temporary mock-up of these 3 different cabins, and young designers were asked to create kind of exemplary environments that could demonstrate the use of these new apps provided by Google. So one was a kitchen where an entrepreneur could create a kind of, start their kind of culinary careers. Another one was a bedroom, and the third room was something of a different environment, but all exemplary environments, very tiny, so tiny environments, but that could be kind of improved and advanced through the integration of the applications provided by Google. The next one, so this is just one of these exemplary sites. The other one, if we could just continue, please. This one is another very exemplary site, also from Los Angeles, actually. It's the second home co-working space in Hollywood. And it's quite interesting. It's very a famous Spanish architectural practice that has designed these spaces. And they look quite intriguing. It's like sitting in a jungle. There are these spots that are distributed in this, as I said, jungle-like garden. But you can also see how many places are squeezed into these spots and how there's nothing that would kind of indicate a person's presence. So it's all very mobile. Next one, please. Another of these very indicative sites. This is the Startup Village in Amsterdam. And it's a composition here in the background. You see a data center, also designed by a very well-known architectural practice. And it's surrounded by a very prototypical container village, which is a collaboration between the University of Amsterdam and also actually also supported by by the data center. And when you go through, it's now been actually expanded. It's a compilation of new startups that can hire these spaces. But we know these container villages being very typical of these new milieus that are created nowadays. Can you continue, please? This is another wonderful site you all are probably very familiar with. It's the Wessel in New York, again, designed by a very famous practice. And here what's striking, it's such a, it's become such a destination, but what it's about pure mobility. In essence, all that that creates the excitement is to climb up and down and to demonstrate activity and circulation. Thank you. Next one, please. Okay, this is a bit, it's a bit of shame that all these slides are kind of cropped. There's more to those images, actually. It's all cropped. In any case, what it shows is co-living space, one of the largest ones currently created in London. It's the Collective in Royal Oak. And as you can see here, it's a compilation of these tiny apartments, around 10 to 12 square meters in size. And as you probably again have heard or researched yourself, those new typologies, but co-living spaces are advertising themselves as having very tiny private spaces, but those are enriched by a plethora of other possibilities. So like, let's say, a communal kitchen or a rooftop where barbecues take place, and or libraries. There's all sorts of extras added on to the private apartment. And another one, please. But of course, we couldn't end this tour through these sites without also including a slide that shows the labor involved in providing the new spectra of platform urbanism. And so this one shows a person collecting e-bikes that have been left by users at different spots, but they need to be redistributed in urban space to be where they are wanted. And this slide was just taken around the corner of our house in London. And I think that's pretty much. Could you just continue to the next slide? Okay, so that was this kind of brief journey through those exemplary sites. And so how would you, I talked earlier about the difficulty to transform this into an exhibition piece. And so what we've, after this long journey around the world, collecting all these different impressions, what we've realized is that it's actually not possible to really come to the essentials of this phenomena purely by reproducing the spatial and visual manifestations. The most important part is to approach this phenomenon in conceptual terms, and by doing so also to reframe it. So we've tried to come up with new conceptual formulations that could help us shift our understanding of platform urbanism. And Peter's just going to talk you through a couple of these new kind of conceptual ideas that we've produced during the research that we hope can help us to shift our reading of platform urbanism.
So one of these ideas is something that you can see here already. But before going into that, let me just say that I had the chance to walk around a little bit before we started and see some of the pieces that are here in the exhibition. Some of them really demonstrate the force of platform urbanism and the many different aspects. And they operate almost similar to the way in which a large chunk of the exhibition that we've produced in Venice is operating, by showing different scenes, different settings in which the forces of platform urbanism are being played out. And the important thing for us was, and Helgis mentioned this before, to understand platform urbanism, that is the coming together of new urban developments and digital platform technologies, and the intersection of these two different processes, understanding this not as a plan, as a strategy that's just rolled out across the world, as something that is static and homogeneous in character, but as a series of different processes and the coming together of different operational fields. So we're rather than talking about platform urbanism as a static phenomenon. We're thinking about the processes behind that. And that brought us to think about these different arenas or operational fields, as we sometimes call them, that activate different strands that collectively we could then term platform urbanism. And these operational fields, they are not entirely independent, they are interrelated, and they are calibrated in many different ways so that they produce something that creates an effect. And to start with the first such operational fields, and we've thought that together with our contributors, with whom we've worked for about a year or so, in these many different exchanges, we figured out that there are at least seven such activity spheres, operational spheres at play that bring together this phenomenon. And the first one has to do with access. And we've created these sort of provocations as kind of slogans to create a dialogue with people who come across them. This is something that you can see as a huge sign in the exhibition, and it says something about our current condition. And access, of course, has to do with the enclosure of so many different aspects of urban life into services that are then sold on to us. And so from the way in which we socialize to the way in which we go about our work, say in co-working spaces, rather than in standard office spaces, everything is something that we pay for. And all of these different elements that create urban life are sold back to us as a service. And access is then what happens when the city as such is being enclosed and sold to us as the service city. Can we have the next one, please? And another such theater that was really interesting for us was to understand the way in which the city is being transformed into this chain of different services, responding to the way in which we ourselves are constantly under pressure. So there's so many different demands that we are confronted with to be more effective, to be more productive, more creative, and so on. So we have little time to do all these things that we would want to do. But the city seems to come to our rescue, the city which is delivered to us as this string of demands. So the city on demand and its constant presence. Can you go on, please? The third such arena, which we see as foundational to this phenomenon, has to do with the collapse of scale. And that has then a connection with the way in which the local, the global, all these different arenas are constantly connected. One recent effect that we saw when we were sitting at home during the Corona crisis was that we have seemed to be constantly connected with everywhere in the world. And when we turned off the computer, suddenly we were confronted with our own bedroom, basically. So that's one of these effects that we see, but it's also showing other effects, and one has to do with regulation. Certainly, global companies, big tech, has a lot of impact on the way cities are run, on the way in which we act within a city. If you rent something from a global company, we are subscribing to certain contracts and rules and forms of behavior. So that is another way in which we see these different scales suddenly collapse. Can you go on, please? And then something that I found really important has to do with the more and more affective production of the city, and the string of affects, the emotions in which we connect to the environment in which platform providers really lure us into into signing a contract about a particular service. So we are friends, we are befriended by companies, we are made part of particular communities, and everything is wonderful. If you want to enjoy a good life, if you want to enjoy happiness, if you want to feel good, which is being sold to us as as one of the most important values, then we have to be part of a particular platform community or platform service. And another one is to do with circulation, which is something, of course, which in a digital capitalism or in capitalism at large, indeed, is something that is well known to us. Circulation as a condition of constant activity, which is being demanded. And circulation is something that we see then enacted in the physical environment. We've seen the vessel, which Helga has presented in New York as a monument consisting of spiral staircases, basically. And everything has to do with circulation, with movement, and the way in which we constantly are activated, are mobilized in order to be creative, to be productive, and so on. Can we go on, please? And a sixth such field of operations is to do with data, which is the elephant in the room, of course, the collection of data and the way in which data has become an important phenomenon in order to structure social relations and in order to create a social fabric across these many different scales. And the last one then has to do with, can we go on, please? With the future. And there's this ominous saying by Mark Zuckerberg, in which he said the future is private. And of course, there needs to be something said about that. And our slogan here is the future is public. But of course, it's about the infringement on public life by platform economies and the way in which everything we do in the public or as the public is being turned into a private space. So that's about these 7 different interrelated operational arenas that we see enacted and performed and constructed by platforms. And next one, please. And that's the way in which we are then thinking about this in an exhibition form, which is, of course, another question, how to address such a theoretical, conceptual way of addressing platform ecologies, how to address this as an exhibition. Can you go on, please? Well, as I said before, this slogan, which is monumental in size, is confronting you as you enter the pavilion, and it signals one of the two, it fronts one of the 2 wings of the gallery space. And that particular wing is about the political economy of platform urbanism, the way in which the economic arena is being constructed, how that is being produced. And the opposite side is fronted by the slogan, the platform is my boyfriend. And it is the second wing in the gallery, which hosts mainly work that revolves around the social and the affective aspects of platform urbanism. And can we continue? And then, as you can see here, we have in the middle of these spaces, there's a monumental structure which holds several monitors. And on the monitors, you see videos which we've produced based on blog entries. There's a weblog, which is the realm hosting a set of 50 or 60, I should rather say 60 contributions by different people. And we've transformed these blog entries, longer texts, into video work. And you see a bit of the animations. Can you go on to the next one, please? And these are just a few slides which illustrate the space. Next one, please. And how, as you wander around in this first gallery space, as you can see, you come across different voices that have something to say about particular aspects of platform urbanism. And that's a side gallery which I will pass on to Helga.
Thanks, Peter. So I think you've already probably seen how we've been constantly working back and forth, if you will. So trying to do justice to the complexity of platform urbanism by integrating as many different perspectives as possible. Peter mentioned the blogs. I should also mention that a couple of people present here this evening have actually contributed to these blogs. Sandro Mesadra is one of them. We have also Lucia Babina has also contributed to the blog contributions. Also the Into the Black Box Collective have contributed. So this is one way to as I said, to justice to the complexity, to try to integrate as many different perspectives as possible. But then, of course, what do you do with this plethora of different voices? I mean, you could create an extensive catalog, but who would actually be able to read through this catalog? So how can you then communicate a complexity that is constituted through thousands, if I'm were to exaggerate different voices, but how then to narrate this perhaps with one single line. So it's this challenge to constantly navigate back and forth between multiple and infinite different perspectives, I would say, and then try to express this in one line, as it were. So what you've seen previously with these slogans, that's, I suppose, is kind of our artistic gesture to use a conceptual idea, but to present that conceptual idea in visual terms. So to make the idea a monument in some way, if you will. But the monument is not constituted through a representation of the material reality of platform urbanism, but through a materialization of a conceptual perspective on the impact of platform urbanism. As we've said, access is the new capital, which was one of the main impacts, I would say, and another very important one, the exploitation of our effective capacities through the emotional allurement into constantly participating in the production of the resources of platform capitalism. And so this is one kind of really one of the key steps that we undertook in creating this exhibition, to navigate between representation and conceptual ideas and constantly try to turn both upside down, as it were. So once we've arrived at a conceptual idea, we've tried to move back into the realm of representation. And once we had arrived in the realm of representation, we tried to reflect on that and move back into the field of conceptual deliberation. So this is one important part. The other important part is how to not just move back and forth between representation and conceptual ideas, but again, as I said before, how to compress almost, if that's the right term, that the many different sides, the many different aspects of it. And another part in the exhibition that tries to do that, it has to do with, if you could just move back, I think we've been a bit too fast. Could you move back again? You're going forward, actually. Could you go back, please? Yes, please. And I think there's another one. Yes, thank you. So as I said before, we started by simply visiting sites that we thought had something to do with this new phenomenon of platform urbanism. So we traveled many times to Silicon Valley, of course, but also to other places in the world, to Mumbai, many European places, London, Amsterdam, Lisbon, for instance. We've not been to Bologna, but I'm sure Bologna has also a couple of sites to offer that you would probably think express this new mentality of platform urbanism. And once we've had collected all these different impressions, the different documentations, one step of processing those had to do with creating these collages that you can see here in the background of this particular slide. So we've not analyzed the thousands of different sites by looking at them individually, but by kind of creating layer of different sites on top of each other. And by creating this collage, certain patterns emerge. So we could see, for instance, when we kind of overlapped all the different paradisiac sites that I've also shown previously. Let's say, for instance, the co-working space of Second Home, which has this kind of atmosphere almost of being, a perfect place. You couldn't dream of a better place to be in. It's all green, it's all very comfortable. There's a cafe, people are wandering around, very relaxed. It's this wonderful world. It's a world of work, but it feels like being in a spa. And so isn't that ideal? And so we've collected all this, fantastic, these presentations of this wonderful new world of platform urbanism. And what you can see in this collage is that, as I've said, certain patterns have emerged. So we've seen that, for instance, the color green was very dominant. Everywhere we found green ingredients. So plants were everywhere. And you know this phenomenon from probably your own experience, that these plants are placed or planted as, in a certain sense, but they're not actually surviving. So many of these plants are actually dying, but they get replanted immediately. So if a plant dies, another one is moved in and it's replaced. So all this is a kind of artificial staging of a green environment. It's not a real green environment, it's a staged green environment. And so we've realized that actually what all these kind of sites that we're looking at, you know, they are real, but they are also very unreal in the sense that they are kind of conceived of representing something that is not a real expression of what's actually happening there. So it's a stage setting, it's a furnished setting. And this particular collage we've therefore termed on stage. It's the stage that is presented to us. But of course, every stage has a backstage. There, as I've said before, the plant's getting replaced, so somebody needs to do that. So what about all that labor involved in there that's invisibilized? And I think Into the Black Box have worked on that a lot, on this invisibilization of the platform labor that's involved in creating these wonderful new stages. And if you could just move on, excuse me, please. Thank you. It's all right, don't worry. So there should be another collage slide. Maybe I think we're too fast. This one, thank you. So this we've therefore termed off stage, and it shows the other side, the backstage as it were. And again, we've created this collage simply by kind of bringing all these thousands of photographs together. So each of these collages involves around 4,000 photographs. And again, certain patterns have emerged. And in terms of the kind of spatial ingredients, if you will, what was quite striking, for instance, was the usage of containers. Both worlds, on stage and off stage, featured containers heavily. But in on stage, they're all very colorful, bright yellow, wonderful blue. And even if they were vintage, they were off blue, wonderful hue and wonderful reds. Whereas in the off-stage world, all those containers were, you know, very shabby. They were brown, gray, and black, or, you know, nondescript color. And so we then thought further about the ingredients of these different worlds. What are the kind of spatial, if they are staged, if they are kind of artificially created, you need certain props, you need certain stage props. So how do these props look like? And if we could just move on to the next slide, please. So we've then looked at the different props, and this is, we've compiled this in this again in a kind of index, if you will, of these new spatial topologies that have emerged in these furnished worlds. And Peter talked earlier about the collapse of scale. It was quite striking again when we look at these different elements. They range from the headphones that you need to wear in order to be actually being able to use a co-working space, because you need to create your own capsule. And if you excuse me for a moment, I'm just moving for this few centimeters. So you need to have these headphones. So these headphones are ubiquitous. Everybody needs to wear headphones in order to be able to use these spaces. So they become an ingredient, and they are spread around the world. Everywhere are people needing and relying on the use of headphones in order to survive in some extent. But then there are there's other furniture involved there as well, also on the urban scale. So the creation of themed urban environments that have, you know, again, the themes might range from being a very green environment or an environment that offers this new harmony between work and life. So they range from the small scale of the headphones to really to large scale on the urban level. But they are detached from their actual site. So one of the features of platform urbanism is the tendency to decontextualization, that everything can be planted anywhere. It doesn't matter where that actually is. It just needs to be a fitting part of the milieu and the atmosphere that you want to achieve. And so I really want to draw your attention to this kind of research approach, because it's again echoes what I mentioned earlier, this constant working back and forth from trying to create a big picture through the collages, but then also to taking this or deconstructing that bigger picture again and looking at the different elements that make this up. And that kind of approach also led us to realize that, of course, one of the key resources that make platforms work is our constant participation in them. No platform would be able to survive if users wouldn't contribute constantly with their input, if they wouldn't make themselves available. That's just the point where we begin. And so to just also start thinking about ways of intervening in platform urbanism, I think this is probably also something that we want to discuss today, is how we can maybe reframe or how we could maybe reorient the purpose and the orientation of platform urbanism. And so precisely the point of our participation is what we've taken as our starting point for this. And as much as this exhibition that we're showing here is an intervention in the way that we can imagine the future of platform urbanism, in a similar way, we also, everybody as a collective or a larger number of people could also come together, and we could collectively start to intervene in the way that we can envisage, in the way that we can imagine the future of platform urbanism. And that's I think the point that we want to draw some sort of initial conclusion, but of course we're looking forward to the responses. And we've prepared another clip for that highlights how we think about the possibilities of intervening in our collective imagination. And as I've said before, a lot of the capital of platforms has to do with how we value platforms, the kind of feedback that we provide, how we recommend them. And so in a similar way, we've started a kind of public image bank where everybody can contribute an image of any sort of site, of any sort of an architecture environment they would like to see more of in the future. So it's a very basic, but a very hands-on approach to start to intervene in our public imagination about the future of platform urbanism. Can we please see the third clip, or the third file, I should say?
We are looking for an architecture of our future. We are looking for an architecture of our future. Share images of desirable architecture on www.platform-austria.org. #PlatformAustria, #WeLike. A phenomenon is haunting the world, the phenomenon of platform urbanism. We are looking for an architecture of our future. Share images of desirable architecture on www.platform-austria.org. #PlatformAustria, #WeLike. A phenomenon is haunting the world, the phenomenon of platform urbanism. We live in platforms every day. They allow us direct and instant connectivity, and their architecture is intrinsically related to how they operate. Platforms operate as elevated structures, bringing importance to what they deem essential. They leave behind all that they deem unimportant or unessential. Platforms are exclusive islands. And while life on these islands might seem frictionless, life outside is definitely not easy. In the long history of modern architecture's tendency to fracture urban life into zones of isolation, platform urbanism becomes the latest chapter of this historical narrative, irrevocably tearing up the last remaining pieces of a communally shared urban fabric. So, how will we live together? The trouble at the heart of platform urbanism is the transformation from spaces of shared values into money-spinning machines. The promise of money has turned platform urbanism into a speculative endeavor, where platform providers and their investors determine not just how cities look, but on what terms we are considered urban citizens, and how we live together. Platform Austria wants to change this with your help. We as users constitute the most powerful resource of platforms. Let's break down the boundaries of the platform and make visible what it is that we like. Let's make visible how we want to live together. Post images of architecture / places / cities that you would like to see more in the future on www.platform-austria.org. #Platform Austria, #we like. We will collect, research, analyze and publish our collective demands on platform urbanism throughout and beyond the Biennale Architektura 2021.
So, Nicolo, I think this is what we had to offer initially, but obviously we are here to enter discussion and also respond to the responses as if that's something you're interested in.
So thanks a lot, Helge and Peter. I invite Carmen, Yvonne and Lucia to sit here. After the presentations, we will have a space for questions, comments, and so on. You start, okay? You start, okay? So I leave the floor to Carmen.
Hello. I don't want to take up too much time, so I don't know. You can just cut me off at any time if I'm rambling. Also, I'll just talk about platforms, and I'm here, but I didn't print it out, so I apologize for the the aesthetic disjunction. But anyway, so yeah, my name is Carmen. I was working as a curatorial assistant for the Biennale project, and my main work was curating the discursive platform within Platform Austria, which Peter and Helga did briefly mention. And when they first came to me with this idea almost 2 years ago, which is crazy, we had a really long chat about what the purpose of creating a platform would be within an exhibition that's critiquing and exploring the urbanization of technology capital and the way that's creating new urban enclosures, as Helga and Peter have talked about in a lot of detail. And what we discussed is the way that the curatorial purpose was twofold. It wasn't, well, there are probably more folds, but anyway, twofold. And on the one hand, we wanted it to be a space for the generation of active discourse about what platform urbanism is and why it exists and what it's becoming. So to kind of bring a name to platform urbanism, if that makes sense. And on the other hand, we wanted it to be a kind of performative encounter, right? So to think about, to kind of use the blog as a site of performative research about what a platform means and what are the potentialities and how it's constructed and structured. And I think that to perform and to enact something, kind of allows for an understanding for the shapes and the contours of what facilitate a structure and architecture. So it can reveal its vulnerabilities and can also shed light on sort of structural intentionalities. So I think something I asked myself a lot in curating the blog platform and in kind of working with these different residents is that when we're studying something about the urban political economy that's based on extracting and the enclosure of the between and the logistics of the movement, and we're working in a process that's about curating a blog, which is kind of like a communicative platform is based on this between. What can working on facilitating the between on the platform show us about these larger kind of conversations and dilemmas? So I think, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out where to go here. So I think one thing that I really felt was interesting is that initially the blog was designed to happen in person through a series of physical residencies. So every week, this was pre-COVID, we had decided to invite a series of theorists or architects or artists to come and take residence in the pavilion to kind of establish a sense of, to discourse the kind of reoriented, reappropriated platform. But then due to COVID, that sort of performative aspect had to be curated onto an online format. And I think moving on to the online format really did shed light on new difficulties that have come with COVID-19 and the way that we've had to mediate the way we communicate and live together affectively and literally through these different technologies. And so that was something that I really felt became clear through the process. I think that I just want to briefly talk about two of the blog entries that I found really interesting in working through them, just to kind of give some space to some of this discourse that was created, which I also think just from reading the course description of your summer school felt like was very much related, and I wanted to bring up. And I did just learn so much from the process as well of doing this blog and working with everyone. And this is like a product of what this discourse has brought. So it really shows that as much as platforms are, enclosing and extracting and exploiting a lot of things, there is a space for wondering how can we intervene and think about the iterative possibilities of this type of architecture. And I think as well, just the whole blog as a concept and the subsequent book and the different installation pieces really work to develop concrete names and analyses for these very complex processes of the urbanization of technology capital, and which was something that Frederick Jameson described as tactically and purposely designed to be difficult to name and difficult to talk about and difficult to bring into form. So the fact that we now have this wonderful collection of analyses and thoughts and thought pieces, I think is already a confrontation of this. So I think just in general, kind of thinking about all of the different, the blog posts and the different arguments that came up, a very common thematic thread amongst the bloggers' contributions was this very sincere urge to engage in a way that was historical and materialist in character, especially from writers who wanted to consider platform urbanism through the lens of decoloniality. So I think a lot of what platforms sell is kind of particularly, when we're thinking about how they seem to be bulldozing municipal governments through like the urban solutions that they claim to offer, is that they are state of the art and they're completely new and they're completely novice and this has never happened before. And as Jathan Sadowski wrote about in his auditory piece, explains it's the process that they are engaging in, this enclosure of urban space into zones of isolation, is not necessarily a completely new concept. And it's based on this relation between technology, urbanism, capital. But what is crucial about this contemporary moment is that these relations are operating through particular spatial and planetary entanglements, which are operating at an unprecedented scale and are operating in ways that seem very particular in their arrangements. And based on this layering and this collapse scale, the impacts they're having on cities is overwhelmingly urgent. And it's arguable that in these collapses and in this layered state of new spatial relations, that there could be space for contestation and intervention. So the first blog post I wanted to talk about was by Manuel Cario, who's an architectural historian, who considers the way that platform urbanism could be conceived in counter-logistical terms, so to theorize an explicitly decolonial Marxism. And in order to work through the possibility of this decolonial platform urbanism, he considers platform urbanism's features as the solidification of capital through logistics and the alienation of labor and enclosure and accumulation and reproduction, and analyzes the way in which hegemonic settler occupation was established and reproduced through processes of architectures and infrastructures being systemized through logistics. So I don't know, how much time do I have? How much time? Like 5 minutes? Well, this video is 3 minutes, so I don't know if it's too long. Anyway, maybe if there's time at the end, we could play it. I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to show the video that we made in response to this, because I think it's a really, really interesting example of this. It's based on an archival image he found from the Iron and Steel Institute in the US in the early 20th century, which basically just outlines a cybernetics logistics that was used to alienate indigenous knowledges from settler occupied land in the Americas. So I think that was a really important intervention, which contextualizes aspects of platform urbanism and the urbanization of technology capital through this lens of decoloniality. And as well, like Manuel Cario, Ross Exo Adams, who's a really interesting theorist and a lovely person as well, proposes a counter platform as well. And in order to do this, he widens the scope of how we nominalize platform urbanism and how we understand it. And the counter platform he offers is actually based on the epistemology of breath. So looking at the I can't breathe and Black Lives Matter. And a counter platform would be collectively conceived through an attention to breath, something which he argues capital has rendered invisible and only noticed in absence. So in outlining breath as an epistemology for articulating a counter platform, he offers an interpretation of platform urbanism, which is based on the urbanization of the body. And so I just want to quote him really quick, because I think he just says it really brilliantly, where he says, "What I mean by this is really only an extension of a logic that cohered in 19th century and generalized spatial typologies and techniques to organize bodies in space, a logic that is in part the product of a larger contemporaneous reconceptualization of the human body that coincided with a new understanding of space from within the emerging centers of global power. The name of this political technology is urbanización, as it was first articulated. And what platform urbanism technologies offer is a kind of improvement of this, providing a host of far more intimate, invisible means by which constant access to the body as an expansive site of extraction, a vessel which immediately converts its physical, psychic, biological, and environmental relations to space and time into capital, and to entangle it as a subject of coercion and control. But that is only just part of the story. Just as platform urbanism isn't the product of Silicon Valley, urbanization isn't, of course, the product of 19th century modernism. It emerged over centuries prior to this, and its roots are far more grounded in archives and epistemologies of the body, as well as the reverberations between territorial technologies and those of colonial spaces, than in some industrial modernizing Western European spirit. So in other words, the biopolitics of managing populations in urban space found its first expressions in the colonial spaces of the plantations. And therefore, the ability to breathe becomes a topography of colonial power that has come to reveal itself in the present, but can be collectively reappropriated to imagine a radical new imaginary. And he quotes Memebe to describe this. So this is just a very small snippet through these two interventions of the ways in which the proposed ideas on the blog have actively engaged in how we name and how we situate and how we respond to the planetary entanglements and the planetary relations that are changing our cityscapes and the way we understand our cityscapes today. So from that, I would love to pass along to someone else. And if I don't know, is there time for the video? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. No? I mean, also, if you're interested, you can just come to the Austrian Pavilion, you know, and watch it. So it's not like urgent, you know. Or you can email me, I can send it. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was also kind of another thing I wanted to, and I wanted to put maybe in dialogue with Lucia about this a little bit, but again, I talked about it being a performative, the blog being kind of a performative enacted situation. And I found that in the process of curating it and organizing it, there was definitely a relation to care and to attention and to adaptability, which was care for the bloggers and the ideas that they were producing and wanting to, you know, give it all of the space that it deserved and needed. Them as well, the bloggers having to care for what they were doing, availability, making oneself available to labor, and all of, you know, these different things, kind of attention and bringing attention to how you adapt these blog contributions into varying formats like the videos. And I think looking at these different trends that emerged through the process, I began to think about that within the context of the attention economy and the care economy, and sort of a lot of what Peter and Helga spoke about as well, and the way that those sorts of cares and attentions are right now being sort of proliferated and functioning for the services of capital, but can be oriented in other ways. I don't know. Okay. I don't know if there's time. Yeah.
I wonder how the internet, as another structure of control whose primary purpose is to make corporations money, is at all helpful in building movements. The internet is the ultimate Cartesian expression of mind and mind only. There are no bodies on the internet. There is no land. Leanne Beto-Somasek Simpson. What of the body of the internet, or of offspring like platform urbanism? The internet has no land, but it is grounded in corporate monopoly power, a mystifying power, a concept full of attempts at representation. Its hegemony comes from its ability to represent itself in particular ways, elevating some forms of existence over others. Parts and wholes. What element gets to be part of what whole? How does it move in a material sense? What belongs where? The spatial imaginary of settler colonial hegemony is Cartesian space. Disembodied systems where only white bodies count, and where black bodies in indigenous land only count to be abstracted through commodification or elimination. Hegemonic representation through imaginary means exercises real power. Native genocide is real. White supremacist oppression is real. There is a material technology to hegemonic imaginations, a logistics, an architecture, which systemically alienates labor and land, mobilizing and displacing them, destroying the indigenous context from which they are taken. I found this image in the archive of the American Iron and Steel Institute, the country's largest metals lobby, while researching the colonial operations of the U.S. Steel Corporation. They carefully curated thousands of architectural publications focusing on design innovations from factory to site. The diagram explores a desire perhaps as ancient as architecture itself, total socio-logistical integration, pointing to the deep histories of what one could call platform urbanism. Feedback loops magically coordinated by a new architectural center alienate embedded and embodied knowledges through conventions of typology and engineering, extracting, isolating, or disentangling local or customary arrangements of use, property, and construction. These formal conventions are architecturally inscribed in subjects, materials, and places, coding within them the hegemonic system in which they will be mobilized and from which they have been designed to perform. It was precisely around the time that the Architectural Center was being theorized that Native American sovereignty was being most radically internalized within U.S. structures of government through either assimilation or termination. Platform urbanism is a contemporary version of this problem, as old as modernity itself. But rather than assuming modernity as a singular agent or ontological reality, I will ask in what ways it both presupposes colonialism as an ongoing structure of domination, as well as in what ways we might think of platform urbanism with its dialectical opposite, an anti-systemic decolonial tool to design the pluriverse, a world where many free and autonomous worlds are possible. Could platform urbanism be thought of as a potential tool for an emerging decolonial Marxism?
Is it still working? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Do you wanna?
Do I use this? Okay. Good evening. I would like to respond first to you because I think it's true that platforms now they serve capitalism, but at the same time, they also were very helpful for a lot of people in a way, not only to meet, but for example, therapists, artists, practitioners of any kind. And what I realized is also that compared to the first wave of the corona, for example, in which we were locked up, and everybody was trying to adapt to the new system and using all this platform and Zoom and applications and so on. It was very much homemade and like funny sometimes. It evolved so quickly, like the next lockdown, everybody was so much organized, were like really perfect and developed eventually their own profession on it, or like 50% of their practice was like already like in there. And I think at the same time also the platform, the big platforms themselves, they evolved very quickly and much in order to serve the exigencies or needs of all these people that were using that. And I agree very much with Helge and Peter that we're saying actually that these platforms are important and are becoming like dominant in our life only because we participate. We are the ones, because if there was no person actually participating, of course, these platforms would be nothing. And of course, it's very like complex question actually how to use these platforms and so on. But I realized that through my research that I made in this contribution I did for the blog, I realized that the people I was interviewing, let's say, they were like also benefiting very much from this kind of platforms because for them, of course, was never the same thing to operate on a real life and on the virtual level. But at the same time, it gave them a lot of opportunities more. So in a way, it's complex in a way to define. But first of all, I would like to introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Lucia Babina, and I'm a cultural activist or social designer. I've been operating mainly, but not only, on this collaborative group that is called Cohabitation Strategies, and we deal with social spatial development, and we deal in particular with the impact of capitalism on cities and on citizens, let's say. So, and especially we are like focused on space, how like this capitalistic system is affecting our space where we live, where we like, for example, what just we cross every day. So if we talk about public space, or if we talk about our houses, if we talk about our other shared spaces. And we actually dealt with a lot of people all over, let's say, in order to discuss and to see what are alternative possibilities in order to create spaces for freedom where we are all eventually free to think and to reimagine what we want in our cities, the way we want to live, reimagining our space, let's say. But then the more I was like working on that, and especially with the coronavirus, let's say, disease, pandemic, I realized, of course, that not only the space around us was affected, but because we were locked up, and at the same time we had also other problems. Also, our intimate sphere was invaded very much, because we were not only just free to decide how we want to live in a space, but we were not even free, or we are not even free enough to decide about our health, or our eventually how we can relate to our body, or how eventually going even inside on our soul and so on. So, and for everything now, really everything, and especially our health, or our body as well, in order to be fit, or to eventually contact a therapist, or so we need to rely on these platforms every day, every time, and we cannot escape that. But before, when we were locked up, of course, it was the only chance. Now, of course, we can go out, we can also see somebody in person, but at the same time, before, actually, we were relying on platforms to meet or to manifest and to express ourselves. Now, even for our intimate sphere, we need to rely on that. And even to breathe, for example, if you do yoga, you do it online. If you need to relax, you do it online. If you just make sex, you do it online. So it's it developed very much and very fast. And so I decided basically to ask some people I know, professionals, who focus every day on the intimate sphere, just to give me some statements about their profession and their practice, also related to the digital world and to these platforms, let's say, how they could just they could adjust to that, what was the evolution of their work, how they felt actually also to deal with it. And it was quite interesting, because actually for me it was also a way to, or it is still a way to research about not only spaces of freedom for imagining now, how we are going to live together, but also spaces of our personal freedom, spaces for healing, spaces actually for changing inside or ourselves first, and then reconnecting to the rest of the world. And one of them, for example, is Kaya Jiwan, who is a life and sex mentor. And actually it was because of this probably evolution of the pandemic that she decided to create this M on Monday, which is a platform for masturbation. Anyway, so people go there and investigate about their sexual energy, the relationship with their body, and so on. It's nothing erotic or something scabrous and so on. It's just really some practices that are quite intimate, but at the same time respect also the intimacy of each of us. And she is investigating also the fact that how we can take care of our body or healing ourselves if we are not able even to, in a way, to touch ourselves, to hug anymore, to, and even other kind of practices, let's say. So they are just using these exercises in order actually how to repractice the muscles of intimacy, let's say. And so just generate more energy for and regenerate themselves, or the participant, they regenerate themselves and so on. And I found it very interesting, the fact that these movements grew a lot during the pandemic, let's say, because people needed more and more this contact, not with other people, but actually more with themselves, because of course these exercises they were doing it together with other people, but each of them was focusing on himself, herself, or themselves, let's say, so in their intimate world, which I find it very interesting in a way. And the second is another practitioner who is a lucid dreaming teacher, who is called Charlie Morley. And I found it very interesting also the fact that he he teaches people how to dream lucid. So meaning that you are aware while you are dreaming. And he found out that, for example, also with the evolution of these platforms, he could really get in touch with much more people and from all over the world. And at the same time, creating like a much more intimate, not much more, but intimate situation at the same time. Because it was not only the fact that you used to see the persons in their home or in their like living space, but because actually people were able to share first thing in the morning with other people their dreams. And for him is the most intimate thing you can do, because of course it's related to your like more subconscious life or your feelings and so on. And what I found interesting also is that like for him, in a way being locked up created these exigencies, for example, to be more into this kind of specific environment of dreamers, let's say. So people were sleeping more, were more relaxed, and then suddenly wanted actually to be active in the dreams in a way. 2 minutes? Okay. And actually, like what he said, it was interesting to me, is that, for example, he was saying in the lucid dreaming, you are free. There is no COVID. You are not locked up in a way, so you can like really do what you want. You are completely free. So you're free also from platforms, from everything. But actually, he was doing it, or like inciting people to dream lucidly by using the platforms in a way. And the third person is Maddalena Fragnito, who is an activist and like dealing with transfeminism. And she, in a way, was inciting with her statement the fact that we have to relearn in this period how to relate to our body, but also just our education, everything, you know, like we have to relearn everything. And at the same time, we have to relearn also how to be some kind of a virus ourselves in order to counteract what are the effects and unstoppable effects of capitalism, for example. And she was, I actually have to find it because I want to quote her and then I'm finished. I'm quoting her because she said, you should read Rethinking the Apocalypse by Indigenous Action. Here is a short piece I wanted to share with you. And it is, colonialism is a plague, capitalism is a pandemic. And these systems are anti-life. They will not be compelled to cure themselves. We will not allow these sick, corrupted systems to recuperate. We will spread. We are the antibodies. So in a way, we have to function also ourselves as antibodies in order to counteract what is happening to us and to spread in a way as much as possible and to be more aware that actually it's thanks, like we are the ones that can make this platform alive, and so we can control them.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm here actually because I'm working in the same department as Into the Black Box, but that's maybe, it's not the only reason why I'm here, but I obviously can't say anything about urbanism. I can't say anything about platform capitalism, because I'm not working in political theory. My field of research is philosophy of language, but I do have a background in literary studies and in aesthetics. So what I can contribute here, or what I've been asked to do, and what I will do now very shortly, because this is not about me, but what I can contribute is a very short sketch about how the entrenchment of art and politics has been theorized in aesthetic theory in the past, and then problematize how this has been done and why it doesn't work today any longer. So to keep it very short, yeah, I think one can do two big, one can individuate two big movements. Yeah, let's call it the Enlightenment movement and the Romantic movement, where maybe the last figure of the Enlightenment movement could be Brecht, yeah, with his concept of Entautomatisierung, yeah, which means end automatization, yeah, where participants in artistic practices learn how to disentangle themselves from their learned behaviors. Yeah. But the point is that this learning is still something that you do on a rational basis. Yeah? So what art has to do is to raise awareness of things that are going wrong in society, and then this awareness enables you to act otherwise. Yeah? The problem with this approach is obviously that there's a gap between awareness and actual action. Yeah? So how do you get from awareness to action? Yeah? You can be aware of all sorts of things. All of us are aware of all sorts of things, of social injustices, of all other sorts of stuff, but we don't act, therefore, yeah, or only partially. Yeah. So these theories have this sort of problem. Yeah. Then the counter movement would be the Romantic strand, let's say, and the last figures of this movement are maybe Richard Rorty in America, and in the continental tradition, the whole Deleuzian strand, yeah, which are saying art is not operating on the rational level, yeah. Art is operating on the symbolic level, yeah. So it is actually directly forging our desires. So there are, however, obviously also problems with these approaches, because if you go manipulate the symbolic order, outcome is unsure. It's not. You may go there with the best intentions, but it's not said that what your intentions are then actually turns out that way, yeah? Because art, like language, is there for everyone. Everyone can go there, and everyone then makes with this what he and she wants. Yeah? There's a second problem with this Romantic strand, and that's its strong emphasis on creativity. Yeah, and let's call that maybe the Mark Fisher point. Yeah. Meaning critique and creativity in capitalism obviously play for capitalism, yeah. Because speaking with Mark Fisher, capitalism is always able to integrate its own criticisms, yeah, because also anti-capitalism, criticizing capitalism, thereby always presumes that the reality you're criticizing is capitalism, yeah. And for art, this is especially striking and easily analyzable, because critical art sells very well. Yeah, this is because, yeah, one can also, or you can also see that in the fact that many major enterprises are investing in art or are hosting art exhibitions, also of artists that are criticizing their own enterprises. Yeah? Because this sort of scandal then gives them an ethical image, and gives to the bourgeois attendant of that exhibition that sort of critical breeze that helps you cope with your moral household, yeah, and gives you already that sort of moral superiority, because you already understood something, and then actually maybe don't need to do something anymore. Yeah. So that's the point about critique. Another point about creativity, there are some German theorists of art, Andreas Reckwitz, for example, or Hanno Rauterberg, but also others, Andreas Reckwitz wrote this book, The Invention of Creativity, which says, yeah, in capitalism, everyone is creative. Yeah? This concept of autopoiesis is penetrating everyone. So artists, we are all artists of ourselves. We are expressing our style with our vestings and whatever you have. Yeah. To cut it short, subculture has become mainstream. Yeah. And Reckwitz calls this the conform dissidents. Yeah. So I think all of this is true. Yeah. But what do we do with this? Yeah. I think the problem here is maybe that if there is a theory that gives you that kind of product, yeah, that kind of output, yeah, then that's depressing, because that sort of theory doesn't create your space of agency. Yeah. So let me tell you very clearly what I mean by this. Yeah, I think the post-structuralist theory, where I would put in the Deleuzean strand as well, that puts the emphasis on creativity and critique and stuff. Yeah, they are working very, very well and gave us very powerful tools when it comes to feminism or post-colonialism. What you said, yeah, I think all the major victories are due to these very powerful conceptual tools. Yeah, but when it comes to conceptualizing art, they drive into this depressing scenario, yeah, and therefore we have to get rid of these theories, I think. The problem is, yeah, what do you do when a theory doesn't work? You either go for secondary elaborations, yeah, that has been done by Negri and Butler, who say, yeah, okay, post-structuralism has this problem that you always bear on the further stances, or that you have negated, yeah, that's the Hegelian point, yeah, that negation always bears the sign of what it's criticizing, yeah, and then you put that up in the helix when it's Hegel or whatever, but you always have the whole train of logical moves that you have made that you have to carry on. And so they say, yeah, we have to find something non-dialectical. We have to find some sort of non-dialectical exit, yeah. The notions there are the nomadism or exodus or whatever. I'm not sure in how far these notions are still predicated upon the whole set of logics and semantics that they are actually going against, but that's up for discussion, yeah. So that would be the secondary elaboration thought. Another thing that one can always do is that you go ravish other archives, yeah, and see what others have done. And actually, when it comes to philosophy of language now, what is my specialty, when it then comes to art, there is a completely different strand of philosophy of language out there, parallel, yeah, that we could go and look. Yeah, I'm done. That we can go look what they're doing, yeah, and that's analytic philosophy of language. Now, I know people always have strong feelings about this, but there is a strand out that does not, I mean, post-structuralism starts with critiquing the Kantian dualisms and the Saussurean picture of language, which is the signifier and the signified, which obviously doesn't work. But then the whole theory bears this logic, yeah? And we could maybe start from a logic that doesn't start with these dualisms. And it's out there, it's Quinean post-philosophy, it's Quinean philosophy of language, but I won't obviously now bore you with that. Yeah. That's what I could contribute. It's a meta commentary and it's maybe beside the point, but thank you for having me. Yeah. So.
Okay, so really thanks a lot to Carmen, Lucia, and Yvonne for their presentations. And now I leave the floor to Sandro, who is going to do a general comment and give us his thoughts on these topics. Then there will be space for questions and comments. And I want to remember that after the end of the roundtable, we will explore the exhibition for people that are following us on Zoom. So I give the floor to Sandro.
Thank you very much. It was a really interesting panel. I already had the opportunity to see the catalog of the Austrian pavilion at the Venice Biennale, which is a really impressive piece of work. So I invite you at least to take a look at the catalog. There are some copies on sale. Speaking of platforms, it is clear, as Lucia underscored, that the pandemic was a turning point. During the pandemic, we have experienced the platforms as a kind of substitute for mobility. And this is doomed to leave deep traces in the near future. And needless to say, it is important to explore the panoply of practices that have negotiated platforms during the pandemic. We are not at all technophobic, although we stress the roles played by platforms, by digital platforms in the working of contemporary capitalism. And these roles are apparent. Just think of Zoom. Before the outbreak of the pandemic, at least in Europe, Zoom was not particularly well known. It has become an economic giant. So we are confronted with the ubiquity of platforms today. And platforms are transforming our styles of life, are transforming our sensitivity, the relation with our body, the relation between public and private, and so on. Platforms are ubiquitous, but as Peter and Helge effectively contended, their effects are difficult to grasp and particularly to represent. And this is the reason why theories of art are so important in a discussion of platforms. Precisely because they address questions of perception and representation. I was particularly struck by the way in which Peter and Helge emphasized the kind of elective affinity between platforms and the potential. And I think this is a really important point. The operations of platform work the boundary between the actual and the potential. And this is true also for that important element that is often made invisible, that is platform labor. If you look at the operations of digital platforms from the angle of a critique of political economy, what immediately stands out is that the operations of platforms are not only predicated upon the actual labor force that is employed, but also on the availability of a wide pool of potential labor force. I have not the time to expand on that, but I think this is a really important point with relevant political implications. Another question that is at the center of the exhibition in Venice, and that was addressed today by Peter and Helge, is the question of access. access is the new capital. You will remember the kind of slogan they commented upon. I think this is another important point, and I would like to discuss it a bit more with you. You will remember that some years ago, a book by Jeremy Rifkin was published, The Age of Access. And Rifkin's point was that property was kind of vanishing in what he called at the time the new economy, substituted by access. I think the way in which Peter and Helge spoke about access goes in a different direction. Logistics is very important here. The nexus between logistics and platforms. I recently read the new book by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten, All Incomplete, where there are a couple of really provoking chapters on logistics. To put it shortly, what they say is that logistics made the assembly line mobile. And they don't simply mean that assembly lines were outsourced to the global south. Their point is much more radical. They say that the operations of logistics in any urban space, like Bologna, for instance, are making the assembly line mobile. You know, assembly line, one thinks of production. Logistics, one thinks of circulation. But the point is precisely that today, in logistical capitalism, in platform capitalism, the boundary between production and circulation is blurred. And in many cases, circulation commands over production. Harney and Moten make also another point. They say that the management of this mobile assembly line is predicated upon the logic of access. This means that managing in a differential, hierarchical way the access to the mobile assembly line is the real business of logistics. This means that access also plays a crucial role in production, or maybe better in the intertwining of circulation and production. How does management of access happen? We know it through algorithms. Management of access, logistical management of access is algorithmic management of access. So I think here the question of property pops up again as a crucial question. In Marxian terms, we can think of algorithm in terms of fixed capital. And fixed capital raises the question, the crucial question of property. So the property of algorithm, which means patent and so on, is a very important question in an age in which access plays a crucial role. I conclude just by saying that I was, of course, also struck by a phrase used by Peter and Helge, which means breaking the boundary of platforms. I think this is a nice way to formulate a very important but also very difficult task for us today. This coincides also with the reflection upon the possibility of counter platforms that were mentioned by Carmen. I repeat, it is a crucial political task and at the same time a very difficult one. So we need spaces like this one in order to discuss about that. And we also need practical experimentations with this riddle in order to be able to break down the boundary of platforms. Thank you again for the work you have been doing, for the pavilion and for the wonderful catalog.
Okay, thanks a lot also to Sandro. So now there is a little space for questions or comments, if there are any. Okay, so we have a question from the Zoom room. I can read it. So it's a question, a comment from Umer Yan. He says, the question of access as capital is interesting to me, both in terms of spatial access as well as virtual access. The politics of virtual access, as it is being deployed by repressive governments to undercut dissent, remains an urgent question, particularly in places such as Kashmir, where we are often for months altogether denied access to communication and virtual platforms by the Indian government. But this question becomes especially complicated when the solidarity international concerns regarding access to communications in Kashmir often takes precedence over material concerns of daily repression, such as military occupation, pervasive torture, and extrajuridical killings. In this way, access becomes a counterproductive concern. So it's a comment, not a question. I don't know if there are other questions or comments from the offline people, or in other cases we can close here. I just I maybe call Maurilio. So in a minute, we will start the exploration of the exhibition for people in Zoom, but of course you are also invited if you want to follow the online presentation for just an idea about the concepts that artists that worked with us with Into the Black Box to imagine together this exposition, and then we invite you to join an aperitivo with us in the space close to here. So I leave the floor to Maurilio.
I want to remind that on Monday we'll have another public event in this space at 7 p.m. with Lale Khalili, Lorenzo Pezzani, and Charles Heller. I think it will be a really interesting event. We will talk about the sea. We will talk about logistics. We will talk about migration. And so you are all invited to join the event on Monday.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank everybody for their responses. They've been really helpful and very insightful and very important for us. And I just wanted to pick up on a few of the ideas that have come up during those responses, and particularly on the notion of potential, because of course, when we make the statement that platforms rely on our participation, and our participation constitutes one of their most important resources, the next question to ask is, of course, why do we participate? What is it that makes us participate? And that's precisely because platforms promise potential, but they promise potential for us personally. They invite us to speculate with our own potential, even if we don't take up the potential, but they provide us with an illusion or an idea that we might have potential. And so what happens is that through our engagement with platforms, whether we post something on the social media platform or whether we, even when we shop something on an online portal, is that we speculate with our potential. And I think that's important to bring those two terms together, that it's not just about connecting a potential that is potentially there, but it's about to start to speculate with a notion of potential. And I want to emphasize that this act of speculation is not a passive one. It actually involves a lot of activity. If we do want to start to speculate with our own individual potential, we need to also think about the input that we make. So speculation is actually a very active process. It can be very demanding, as some of you might know, who work on their profiles in order to enrich their own capital, their portfolio. And this question, what that triggers, what transformative processes in the urban, but also in around our personal subjectivities and existences, what that makes us to do, that ubiquity of that speculative mentality, of that speculative paradigm, is really what we have kind of concluded in our research is something that needs to be addressed. And I think also in terms of why platforms are so successful as an infrastructure of capitalism has to do with the fact that through all these promises of a speculative potential, it allows for the interchange between different formations of capital. And this is one of the driving forces, to promise that there is a possibility that potentially a new formation of capital might emerge, but also that different stratas of capital, whether it's material capital, whether it's creative capital, human capital, and other forms of capital, that there is this promise that those different forms of capital can be interchanged via the technology of platforms. And this is just one of the key aspects that I've taken from those responses. I just wanted to highlight those again. Thank you. Oh.
Okay. No, in realtà devi eliminare. Chiediamo.
Prova a attivare, no, prova a attivare il microfono.
Perché qui il microfono funziona.
Allora, parla da qua.
Sì.
Io sento la voce.
No. Give me a feedback. You hear me? Okay, I hope so. Okay, I will just present you briefly of the organization of black boxes platform urbanism. The idea was to give some insights on platform urbanism using artistic languages. So we engaged in this attempt artists and photojournalists that share with us their explorations into the impact effects of platform urbanism on the city, from the working conditions to the environment to the inner life of city dwellers. In our tour, we start from Ilaria De Pari with Na Manzoor. This is a light box with a paint, and you may hear also this slogan. This is a slogan chanted by food delivery riders, especially migrant riders, during one of their strikes. And so here we tried to sketch, a first picture of a urban settlement of the platform urbanism. Here we move to installation. We may enter here. We have a it is installation going back to the first Amazon delivery. It has been the first book. Amazon started as a bookshop online. This is the reply of the first book shipped by Amazon, and here we have a reply by Dario Sanna. We move to the third box. We have work by David Lawson, of scale. We have on this side an exploration of different urban scales. We have the level of the middle level of the city, lower level, ground, and the higher level is skyscraper. And here there is also, a video. And on the other side, these pictures taken during live day of Amazon driver. So documenting also how is live day of the Amazon driver. Here we move to open Amazon box. In this installation into the black box, tried to do tour an Amazon locker using an old archive. The archive as a prototype of data collection. In this case, we do not have normal packages. We have this QR code that gives information. I cannot try to open them now, but if you take pictures, this QR code will give you information on the hidden side of Amazon. It means on the attempt to fully automatize the labor, the working conditions, and the strikes of the worker. So in this case, there are no packages, but information on how the black box of Amazon is working. And the black box used a sort of locker that is an iconic tool of the platform Urbanism. Here we move to the first part of the Bookshoe collective installation. Here we have a work on Prato, on the community in Prato, a different way to discover the city. Thanks also to to the way to build up a different perception of the city. Maybe Zen may say something else on this briefly.
And Prato last year, we maintained two parts of the work. One is this thing we do with this working to have another vision at the Chinatown of the Prato. We know Prato is a very big industry of the fashion and textile. So there's a very big community of workers, Chinese workers there. But there are some very huge problems labor. So many people don't know about the situation there. So we invent this working project with a true story of a Chinese girl and this girl walked from the Padua to Prato. So we imagine there is eyes of the city. Maybe it's homeless people who make the story.
There's also sort of question in the chat. We explain that the word "namansura" means not acceptable. It's a slogan by the riders against the working conditions in the platforms. Here we move to Giulio Di Meo work. Here we have some pictures from Di Meo reportage Anticorpi Bolognesi. That was a reportage, a photo reportage on the life during pandemic and the COVID. And this is the part on food delivery riders. So Giulio tried to sketch a picture of the life of food delivery riders that was almost the ones leaving the city during the pandemic, but at the same time struggling. So we see pictures from big effects, like in this case, from some strikes. But we see also, for example, pictures from a moment where food delivery riders organized to give face masks to other colleagues, as the platform were not furnishing them such kind of health protections. We move to the second part of Vukshu work. Here we have Sankinism. It for sure will be more able to explain, but I would say, in my opinion, it's a sort of a renewal of the of work. In this case, in China, especially from workers engaged with online labor, so an attempt to reduce the culture of labor and an attempt to devalorize the culture of labor and to live without pressures, without time, without capitalist rules, I would say.
So the people online who have wrote this manifesto, or not living, not working from 9 o'clock to 9 o'clock and 5 hours a day or more than 5 hours a day. To in fact, the 躺平 is lying down. Life.
Thank you. So we move here on another kind of section outside the border, or to see the effects of the urbanization on from urbanism, but the growing of the urban spaces is not also without effects on the environment. And many times the problem is that we do not see the effects of what happens to the environment because of climate change, because of growth, because of capitalism. In this case, Michele Lapini investigated through aerial photography some backgrounds, some landscapes where we may see effects of climate change and of the growth of urbanization. As like something not usual to see from an aerial perspective. So here, and the little solution to global warming, to try to save the ice on the sea. Here's like another issue. So there's like the effect of the industrial food animals, or the excrement of animals. So there's like clothing in the Podana area, and there's like other the construction of a new water infrastructure, because it was like a very polluted area, and there was like the need to build another new infrastructure, because the old one was like the storm in North Italy in 2018, and they destroyed millions of trees with the wine, and it's like one of the most visible episodes of climate change in Italy. We have final box. Unfortunately, I cannot help you to hear, but we have the final box. With this is a work by Lucia Babina. It's a work that is part of the platform Austria, the pavilion of Austria. In this case, we selected 3 recordings as Lucia tried to investigate the impact of digital technologies on inner life. So in many cases, when we speak about the city, we concentrate on the outside, on landscape, on buildings. In this case, there is the attempt to investigate what happens to the inner life of city dwellers. And Lucia selected 3 recordings where different people analyze the impact of digital technologies on their inner lives. So you may see it and here, which is the impression these different people have of digital technologies impact. So I thank you for the attention, and maybe we will have the possibility to see again this exposition in another event. See you soon.